There are some interesting trends that we're seeing right now that could be bad news for some fantasy players that you're targeting in your drafts this season. We need to decide, do we forget the noise or do we buy into it? And maybe it's time to start avoiding some of these guys. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some concerning usage over the first week of the preseason and whether or not that's going to be trouble for some sleepers and some pretty high-end draft picks this season in fantasy football. And these things are going to be worth watching over the next couple of weeks of the preseason because if they do continue, some of these guys could be in a lot of trouble and won't contribute nearly as much as we thought they would this season. And if we decide that we need to skip on any of these players, you may need our 2024 Fantasy Football Draft Guide to help you out. And I want to give one away for free in this video today. All you need to do after the video is done is head down below and comment with hashtag he's a bust. And then let me know which one of these players in this video today you think is going to be the biggest bust this season and why. And I'll do like I did in one of my last videos where some of the best comments that I see will get pinned at the top of our comment section. And at the end of the week, I'll pick one of those comments that was pinned to win a free draft guide. So make those comments count so you can get yours for absolutely free. Drake London is definitely a fan favorite this season. Lots of people feel like it's going to be his breakout year. But there may be some things happening within the Atlanta offense that could make the targets a little bit more difficult to come by than what we had originally thought. And some of that stems from new offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, who was with the Los Angeles Rams last season. Now, last season, the Los Angeles Rams ran 11 personnel, which means only one tight end, typically 3 wide receivers, 94.7% of the time, one of the highest numbers in all of football. The first week of the preseason, it was 95.6 11 personnel for the Atlanta Falcons. And why does that cause concerns for Drake London? Because that means you're going to have 3 wide receivers on the field plus Kyle Pitts. Based on what we saw from the first week of the preseason, there is a really good chance that we could end up seeing Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Ray McCloud in the slot, and then Kyle Pitts playing on the end line as a traditional tight end a little bit more often. If that ends up happening, that's actually great news for Kyle Pitts. We can get a lot more leverage that way. But it's terrible news for Drake London. If we're running only 2 wide receivers on the field, then he has an opportunity for Kirk Cousins to look his way more often. But now if all of a sudden we're throwing 3 guys out on the field, plus Kyle Pitts, plus Bijan Robinson in the backfield as a weapon, now the target share that we were hoping for Drake London could end up being a little bit smaller. Does it absolutely kill his value? No. But if you thought he was a locked in stone wide receiver 1, that may be something that we need to reconsider. Let's stay at wide receiver and talk about Keon Coleman, the promising young wide receiver out of Buffalo. There are some things that could be concerning for his usage this year. And first and foremost, if you watch the video from this past week, if you watch all of the plays with Keon Coleman where he ran routes, the concerns of him having trouble separating absolutely showed up in week 1. And that's something that could continue to be an issue for him until he learns how to make his routes a little bit more sharp. That's growing pains sometimes, and wide receivers absolutely can get better at separating. Devontae Adams with his hands in separation, his rookie year, people had concerns, and look at him now. So Keon Coleman isn't necessarily a bust. But if for some reason it takes him a little bit longer to develop, 2024 could be a really tough year if you expect him to contribute to your fantasy team. And not only that, it's going to strongly depend on the personnel the Buffalo offense decides to run, because Keon Coleman has Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Matt Collins on the outside with him, with Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel in the slot. But they're going to be moving a lot of guys around, and if Keon Coleman isn't super steady to begin the year, they could start working him on the off the field with a lot of that rotation throughout the first few weeks. So make sure you continue to watch Keon Coleman, because this definitely is something that we want to keep our eye on, and we want to see how much he grows over the next few weeks. I've been pretty high on Christian Kirk the last couple of seasons, and after losing Calvin Ridley to free agency, it felt like Christian Kirk was in a really solid position. But Jacksonville decided that their wide receivers needed to get stronger and added Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis to the mix. But for the second straight year, we may have to have some concerns about where Christian Kirk is going to play. Because for the second straight preseason, and even last year heading into the regular season, Christian Kirk was not viewed as an outside wide receiver. The only time he was playing was in 3 wide receiver sets. And in week 1 of the preseason, we saw the same exact thing. Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis were starting on the outside when the Jacksonville Jags ran 12 personnel. Only 2 wide receivers on the field. When they switched to 11 personnel and had 3 wide receivers on the field, that's when we saw Christian Kirk come back into the slot. And last season was the same thing with Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones. In fact, throughout last year's preseason and the first week of the regular season, Christian Kirk was only playing 55% of the snaps. After Zay Jones went down with his injury, that jumped all the way up to 70% of the snaps. If Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas both stay healthy, Christian Kirk could be in for a lot of trouble. And also, you may have heard me mention 11 personnel and 12 personnel already, and I want to explain real quick what that is in case you don't know. 11 personnel refers to how many tight ends are on the field. 11, 1 running back and 1 tight end. 12 personnel, same exact thing, except the 2 stands for the tight ends. 1 running back and 2 tight ends. So when a team runs 11 personnel, you're normally going to see 3 wide receivers on the field. When a team runs 12 personnel, you're typically going to see 2 wide receivers on the field. Let's talk a little bit about Austin Eckler and the running back position, because Austin Eckler, viewed by many, is the guy that's going to play more over Brian Robinson. Even though the ADP seems to be a little bit back and forth, and we've seen these 2 guys fluctuate quite a bit, it doesn't seem to be the case based on the preseason week 1 game plan. Because even though they had nearly an identical amount of snaps, Brian Robinson was clearly the lead back and saw a majority of the work on the ground in early down situations. Now, Austin Eckler did come onto the field in late down situations, but it doesn't seem like Washington views him as a running back that's actually going to tote the ball 150 or 200 times this season. And that type of split would mean a significant decrease in fantasy value for Austin Eckler. It would mean Brian Robinson is going to get a majority of the touches on the ground, the ones that we can almost bake into his value every single week. It's the targets in the passing game that would be really difficult to try and figure out. And that's where Austin Eckler would have to make his money this season. So while Brian Robinson could find himself as a really nice, safe RB2 because of the amount of carries he gets, Austin Eckler, at best, may only be a guy that we can consider down in our flex spot. Because if he's not getting the touches on the ground and we're trying to bank on the targets every single week, he's going to need some touchdowns to help give him value. And I'm going to stick in Washington here for a second, because if Luke McAfee was a deep sleeper for you this season, that probably isn't going to work out very well unless there's an injury. Right now, Luke McAfee does not seem to have a solid spot on the depth chart. Terry McLaurin and Dyami Brown started on the outside for Washington this week, and there's been a lot of talk in camp about Dyami Brown and how good he has looked and that he has deserved an outside spot. Now, Dyami Brown may not be an issue for Luke McAfee, but do you know who is? Jahan Dotson. And Jahan Dotson, with Dyami Brown on the outside, has now moved back into the slot for Washington. And Jahan Dotson is the type of explosive playmaker that from the slot could end up having a really solid season. And Jahan Dotson actually saw some extended snaps after the starters went out. And we have to presume that's probably because moving him back into the slot, they wanted him to just kind of get used to the game plan a little bit more from being there. He didn't play very long after the starters came out. But even after the starters came out, Luke McAfee didn't see any playing time until the second half. That's not good. Listen, I love the Muth. Pat Freiermuth from Pittsburgh, tight end, absolutely a game changer in the red zone. But I don't know if he's being seriously considered for as many snaps this season by Pittsburgh as he should. Right now, it looks like Arthur Smith is going to strike again. Because when Pittsburgh this past week decided to play 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field, Pat Freiermuth was nowhere to be seen. It was Darnell Washington and Michael Pruitt that were used in 2 tight end sets. Pat Freiermuth never saw the field last week when there was 2 tight ends on the field. But when they went to a 3 tight end set to run the football, that was the only time that Pat Freiermuth came out. That could spell absolute disaster because Arthur Smith may be looking at his tight ends as more as blocking tight ends and a way to establish the run instead of looking at Pat Freiermuth as a passing game weapon. And considering how many looks Kyle Pitts got last year in that offense, it wouldn't shock me if, unfortunately, it ends up being the same thing. Now, Jonnu Smith did see some decent targets last year, but he was super inconsistent. He had some good games, and he had some bad games. But if Pat Freiermuth is really in a 3-man rotation with those 2 tight ends, we're going to find ourselves in trouble with him, and he shouldn't be drafted in any leagues if that happens. This situation right here is very, very important to monitor over the next couple of weeks. I feel like I continue to harp on Zamir White this offseason. I keep getting met with a lot of people pushing back. Kyle, you got to see the light. Zamir White is the guy. He's going to have a fantastic season. League-winning, game-changing, late-round pick. I still don't see it. And the numbers and what we saw from this past week in the preseason, week 1, actually back that up still. Because Zamir White continued to be taken off the field on 3rd downs and even on 2nd and longs. And the bigger issue here is the fact that Alexander Mattison played all of the passing down work with the starters over guys like Amir Abdullah. Alexander Mattison is definitely viewed as a part of this offense by the Las Vegas coaching staff. If he's going to be used on 3rd downs and he's going to be used in passing situations, that just means those are snaps that he doesn't need to worry about Zamir White. And now Zamir White has to make his stamp on those early down situations. Now, this could be viewed as a good thing, and it could be viewed as a bad thing. But after the starters came out of the game, Zamir White actually came back into the game. And the only time he came back was in some goal-to-go situations. Now, why could that be good? That's good because they view Zamir White as the lead back in those goal line situations where he's going to make some fantasy points up with those touchdowns. That's great. Love to see it. But he came back in after the starters had been taken off the field. And realistically, from an NFL coaching perspective, that means they're not sold on Zamir White. And they wanted to give him extra reps in that situation because they felt that he needed it. If they thought Zamir White was good, they wouldn't have put him back on the field without the starters. He would have stayed off the field. How many times do you see the starting running backs coming back onto the field in the preseason after the starters have already been taken out because the coach wants to get him a goal line carry? I'm sorry, but it doesn't happen. These are definitely concerning trends for Zamir White. Cole Kmet was an absolute fantasy stud the last couple of years with Justin Fields. But unfortunately, the tight end coach from the Los Angeles Chargers came over to the Chicago Bears this season, and he brought along one of his favorite weapons Gerald Everett. Jim Dre and Gerald Everett have been together on several stops during their career, so it would make sense that Everett felt like signing with the Chicago Bears made a lot of sense this offseason. But that hurts Cole Kmet, and in week 1, Gerald Everett was absolutely favored over Kmet. Gerald Everett in week 1 of the preseason saw more snaps, and he saw more routes run. On top of that, Gerald Everett stayed on the field for all third down passing situations. Cole Kmet came off the field. And in almost all of their one tight end sets, it was Gerald Everett over Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet really only found the field in 2 tight end sets this past week. That is not good. If this is an absolute rotation at the tight end position, or if the Chicago Bears really feel like Gerald Everett offers them something that Cole Kmet doesn't, Cole Kmet's fantasy value will absolutely tank. And as of right now, I don't think that I could draft him. He's definitely one tight end that I've got to stay away from. We're trying to watch like Pat Freiermuth and see if that keeps up over the next couple of weeks. But we know that Gerald Everett and Dre have a history together. So this early in the preseason is super concerning. Now, there may be nothing to worry about with Tank Dell, or there could be something to worry about with Tank Dell. Because this past week with the starters, Tank Dell only saw 2 snaps in 12 personnel, meaning when they had 2 wide receivers on the field, only twice was that second wide receiver Tank Dell. A majority of the time, it was Stefon Diggs and it was Nico Collins. But then when they switched to 11 personnel and had 3 wide receivers on the field, Tank Dell didn't come into the slot, Stefon Diggs scooted into the slot, and Tank Dell went to the outside. Now, that may not end up being a big issue, and Tank Dell ended up scoring the lone touchdown this past week, and we know CJ Stroud absolutely loves the dude. So, is he going to be a guy that it's like, yeah, absolutely no, can't do it? I wouldn't say that. But I think these numbers here and these trends only establish the fact that these wide receivers this season in Houston are going to be really difficult to predict. And if you're looking to really latch onto one any given week, volume-wise, it may end up being Stefon Diggs is the safest, with Nico Collins as the highest upside. And then Tank Dell is really going to be that guy that's going to have some huge weeks, and he's going to have some down weeks. Personally, for me, I don't want any of them in redraft. I think they're going to be a fantastic offense. I would only consider them in best ball. Headliner Nation, do not forget, leave your comments down below, letting me know which one of these players you feel will be the biggest bust this season. And I'm going to pick one of the comments to win a free draft guide. But I want to see more than 1,000 likes on this video for that to happen. So start hitting the like button. Start hitting the bell notifications. Anytime we drop new content, you should know about it right away. And if you want to get your draft guide right now and not wait for it, head on down to the link below in our description, tfhdraftguide.com. You can get yours now for $21.99, and you know what? If you buy yours but end up winning anyway, we'll just refund you the price. Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here. Peace out, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics, all the chain, all the channels, not the same. Jake and Kyle